Our next speaker is Jacqui Taylor, and she's a true multitasker, at least from her biography. She's recognized as one of the 100 most powerful entrepreneurs in the UK and has been awarded an honorary doctorate of science in recognition of her IoT work. She's also a visiting professor at one of the UK universities. She's also a successful entrepreneur. She co-founded FlyingBInary, which is a web science company. And she is also heavily involved with the standardization. I just picked a number of things that I liked and understood what you're doing, but if you're interested in having more, we have a full biography on the website and the application. So the floor is yours, Jacqui.
Thank you. Can I ask you? Oh, thank you. Thank you for switching. So good afternoon. I'm founder and CEO of FlyingBInary. I'm an international web scientist, and if you haven't heard the term before, no worries, Tim Berners-Lee made it up. But the biography is a reflection of the work that we do. It's about producing the web that we want and enabling that for society. Okay, thank you. I work in Europe as a digital leader in the Internet of Things space, and at FlyingBInary we've produced a new trust and privacy model to implement the NIS directive and GDPR regulation for the digital single market. And as one of Tim's web scientists, we built capability from the original work on the 20th anniversary of the World Wide Web, where only 18% of the world was online, and we're now approaching tipping point as we approach 50% of the world online. And we've built out that technical capacity to support the next phase of adoption. And that will be very much focused on meeting the challenges for an Internet of Things and the web of resonance, Web 3.0, if you know any of the web science work. A little bit about FlyingBInary and why the share and reuse agenda is important to us. We're a web science company that changes the world with data, and a bold statement, we have 34 million citizens that contribute to the work that we do as a result of founding the data journalism industry. And as cloud specialists, we've been awarded all 8 Her Majesty's Government cloud frameworks. We're one of the most successful suppliers to Her Majesty's Government for this industry-leading cloud initiative, which is built on a share and reuse philosophy. And it's also built under European procurement rules. At the end of the day, whatever happened at 12:30 today, we're Europeans. So our cloud services have equivalents in Europe, and they're built to maximise the opportunities for the digital single market. They're based on soil in the UK and in Amsterdam, and they're designed to support the ambitions of all member states. The new platforms which will be awarded in May are the Smart City and Internet of Things platforms, which standardisation work I've been doing for the last year. So for the technologists in the room, I thought it was important to say there are 25 accredited and certified interoperable cloud services based on COTS software, not all open source. I'm very famous in the web science world for saying you live and die by the open source sword, and we deploy this for HM government in the secret and military secret space, and that's not a space that is tolerant of such things. They're built from the ground up every 6 months to meet the web scale challenges of IoT, an ambition that the UK government is pushing hard on. And they're bought directly from a digital marketplace without any need for any procurement, because procurement was the biggest barrier to Internet of Things adoption in the UK. The Crown Commercial Service that own the framework contracts that we're awarded tell us that we're on average 90% cheaper than the alternatives HMG would normally use. So in your meet scores when you're doing your procurement, that goes well. But actually, it's one of the key reasons the UK did a cloud-only policy. So if you're one of the 39,000 organisations that the HM Treasury funds, you need to go cloud. But it's been more than that, because they've seen the regulation legislation changes we needed to have from a trust and privacy point of view, and critically the digital single market. It was about actually envisaging that new future. The services we were awarded in August last year, though, were very different. We've no dependency on the Privacy Shield, which turns out to have been a good decision. We secured an NHS gateway. Our health services actually having some significant challenges with approaching GDPR, and its network capability is off the normal health network. If you know about these things, there's no N3 or PSN connection. And this incremental and flexible approach has been critical for Her Majesty's Government to ensure they leverage a legacy that they have that they're sat with, but that they can envisage that new future. So that share and reuse agenda brought that legacy with it and didn't constrain it. And it's been a journey. For Crown Commercial Service, though, as one of their leading suppliers, what I want to talk to you today is the 5 years of experience where we've done this sharing and reuse with a cloud-only policy across not just national government, but the local governments, and as I said before, 39,000 organisations. We've actually made a bunch of mistakes. We've got a couple of really key learning points that I think are important for this agenda, and I wanted to share those with you now. The first one was unlocking that data estate that we had. That actually, all of our data problems that the G-Cloud platforms solve, this one's been the biggest impact, not just for public sector, but for private sector as well. We call it the value platform, and the reason being is it builds data capacity in any organisation, and it starts with the data that people are familiar with and they already have access to. But crucially, it uses a data in place strategy. No data was ever moved or harmed during this process. And for those of you familiar with Russell H. Conwell's book, this is where Her Majesty's Government's found its acre of diamonds, bringing that legacy to bear. And it's become the launch pad for the next generation of data transformations in the UK. However, whilst we've been able to build capability, we haven't done so well with capacity, because on average, only 8% of people in organisations that work across the world tells us have the skills and access to the data with the licensing that you're talking about there to be able to do what needs to be done. And this would have been considered a goal when we started this work in 2011 in Her Majesty's Government, because that just wasn't anywhere near 8%. But the problem with this approach is we've raised what we're calling a herd of unicorns. We've put data capability in the hands of the few, and that's just not serving us and won't allow us to unlock the Internet of Things. So with the launch of our G-Cloud 8 services in August last year, we actually created new roadmaps for these cloud services to build capacity. They're self-service data platforms. They're secured and accredited by GCHQ, our national security organisation. You may have read now our National Cyber Security Centre. But it actually allows 80% of the organisation to be involved in this data transformation, non-data specialists, to use data every day to create that value I mentioned. This is one of the first data sharing platforms under the new rules. It's actually for our education data. It's based on our smart cities. 83% of the population in the UK live in our cities. And so the data is used internally by policy specialists across the education estate to create the UK official statistics. But this self-service platform is actually open on the web, and it's used by the Department itself of Education, no surprise there, but across Whitehall, all of Westminster, the private sector use it, data journalists like myself use it, parents use it, governors, head teachers. And it's actually a single version of the truth, and it's enabled a new data-driven approach to the way in which we educate our people. And that's because we've federated it around 21 new indicators, having understood what we've done, how we perform, what it has. And it allows us to compare our smart cities based on results, but not based on geography, not based on funding, but actually taking account of social demographic. And this shared data is now the next key building block for our Internet of Things in our share and reuse agenda. This is one of the reasons why. GDPR mandated on the 25th of May 2018 across Europe. That will apply to the UK too. And our ICO has confirmed all of that, but personal data covered by GDPR, there's additional requirements for a data controller, like a government organisation. But the processing of children's data particularly has got added regulatory requirements to ensure that young people can be consulted in this process. And that's an important point for us at FlyingBInary. And the days of tick box and sent are over. Really, privacy by design is actually here and being rolled out, which is a fantastic thing. I'm technical author for a new British standard for smart cities. It's called PAS 183, catchy title, but it moves the smart city sector in the UK on from open data. We don't have an open data agenda in the UK anymore. We're not going to have one. That's just because it's business as usual now. We do what we do. And this is the first sector, the smart cities in Europe, to be enabled for GDPR. And the Secretary of State will launch the initiative in London towards the end of April, but it will officially be available free to download from the BSI website next week. So you can all have a look at that. And the reason for this approach from the UK is repurposing of secondary use of data from citizens across the social web without gaining consent. I mean, the Commission lawyers have confirmed that the research projects under H2020 won't be using that data, and there needs to be a new approach to how we look at this work. And in the policy space for smart cities, we've needed to contextualise what we're producing for government services, specific to a city. We have 188 cities in the UK, and everyone is different. But obviously, governance needs to be similar. We need to protect them. We need actually policy to be able to enable them, and that wider policy work as well. So this is some smart health provision in our UK cities. This was the original evidence base that allowed us to change policy and put us from just a cities basis to rural and coastal. And a new trust model was born from it. We call it the volunteered personal information. It uses no big data techniques. It's secured and accredited and compliant with GDPR, and we call it web intelligence. And it's where we can connect directly to citizens one-to-one and ask them questions on policy issues, on anything, on research, whatever we need to know. And this underpinned the redesign of our health service last year because we, as citizens, directly participated in the decisions changing their care provision. And it was the young people, the LGBT groups, that actually got new service provision in health based on this new trust model. So I've raced through that, apologies for that, but I think I'm out of time. I wanted to thank you for listening. One of the things I hope came across is cloud is a must for the Internet of Things. And from the digital single market evidence base that we've accumulated, it showed us we'll have more compute outside of our cloud services by the end of 2018. So it's a reality. And it's a priority to deliver those services using a secured Internet of Things, but under our GDPR regulation. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jacqui.